5:43 p.m., November 8, 2023, Bucharest, Romania. The ambulance siren pierced the silence of the Floreasca neighborhood as paramedics found Andreea Popescu, 28, kneeling in the hallway of her apartment. Her hands trembled as she pointed to the living room. "She's not responding," she repeated in Romanian, her voice broken with shock. On the beige leather sofa, Mia Constantinescu lay motionless. 23 years old, shoulder-length brown hair, a small infinity tattoo on her left wrist. The wound on her chest had stopped bleeding at least 2 hours earlier, according to the initial assessment of the emergency responders. The scene was eerily calm. No signs of a struggle, no objects out of place. Mia worked as a digital marketing analyst at a tech startup in downtown Bucharest. A graduate of the University of Economics and fluent in 4 languages, she had built an independent life far from her hometown of Constanța on the Romanian coast. Her colleagues described her as reserved but competent, someone who avoided discussions about her personal life during coffee breaks. The 65 square meter apartment on the 8th floor revealed details about her meticulous routine. Books organized by color on the bookshelf, well-tended plants on the balcony, a small makeshift gym in the guest room. On the refrigerator, magnets held photos of her with Andreea on trips to Prague and Vienna. Always discreet, never touching each other directly. Chief Inspector Radu Mihai of the Bucharest Metropolitan Police arrived at 6:20 p.m. A veteran with 15 years of experience in homicide, he noted that the front door showed no signs of forced entry. Both locks were intact with no marks from tools. Andreea explained that she had used her own keys to enter after Mia had not responded to her messages throughout the day. The first items collected by the forensic team included a Walter P22 pistol caliber .22, found on the floor near the coffee table. The serial number was visible and there were no signs of filing or alteration. A single spent shell casing was found under the recliner. There was no evidence of secondary projectiles or ricochets on the walls. Andreea Popescu worked as a nurse at the Bucharest University Emergency Hospital. She and Mia met through a dating app in January 2023 and formalized their civil union just 3 weeks before the incident. The relationship remained a closely guarded secret. Neither their families, employers, nor close social circle had official knowledge of it. During the preliminary interview, Andreea revealed that Mia had mentioned growing tensions with Erdem Yilmaz, her cousin on her mother's side. Yilmaz, 31, a construction worker in Istanbul, had been in sporadic contact with his Romanian family since his teens. According to Andreea, he had visited Bucharest the previous week, staying at a hotel near the airport. The initial investigation identified 47 missed calls on Mia's cell phone, all originating from a Turkish number registered to Erdem Yilmaz. The text messages, written in a mixture of Turkish and Romanian, escalated in tone over the last 5 days. The last one, sent at 3:32 p.m. on November 8th, read, "You can't ignore me forever, Mia. Some secrets are expensive." The gun found at the scene was legally registered to Andreea Popescu, who had purchased it 6 months earlier with a license for personal protection. She explained to investigators that she kept the gun in a digital safe in her bedroom, but could not remember checking it in the days leading up to the crime. When asked about possible motives for conflict between Mia and Erdem, Andreea hesitated before responding. She mentioned that her cousin had discovered their relationship during his visit and reacted with extreme hostility. "He said horrible things about our relationship," she revealed. Mia was very upset, but she didn't want to involve the police. Preliminary analysis of the scene suggested execution by a single shot at close range, with no signs of resistance from the victim. The position of the body and the blood pattern indicated that Mia was sitting naturally on the sofa at the time of the shooting. There was no evidence of physical restraint or prior intimidation. By 9:30 p.m., the forensic team had completed its initial documentation of the scene. Evidence collected included the firearm, the spent shell casing, ballistic residue samples from nearby surfaces, and Mia's cell phone with the threatening messages. Andreea was taken to the police station for a formal statement, while the investigation prepared to expand beyond national borders. However, 3 disturbing details remained without immediate explanation. Why Mia had not reported the threats to the authorities, how the perpetrator had gained access to the apartment without leaving any signs of a break-in, and most importantly, where Erdem Yilmaz was at the time. If this case has already captured your attention, consider signing up to follow how an international investigation would reveal secrets that 2 families fought to keep buried for decades. Constanța, Romania, a port city where Mia was born into a family marked by intercultural tensions. Her father, Nicolae Constantinescu, worked as a naval engineer. while her mother, Leyla Yilmaz Constantinescu, was descended from Turkish immigrants who settled in the region during the 1960s. The union between an Orthodox Romanian and a woman of Turkish origin had led to lasting conflicts with both extended families, creating an environment where conservative traditions constantly clashed with modern aspirations. Mia had demonstrated exceptional academic performance since her teens, earning a full scholarship to study in Bucharest at the age of 18. University colleagues described her as independent but reserved, rarely mentioning details about her family background or romantic relationships. An analysis of her educational records revealed that she had gradually distanced herself from her hometown, visiting her family only during mandatory holidays and maintaining minimal communication with relatives. Andreea Popescu had a contrasting socioeconomic profile. The daughter of doctors in Bucharest, she graduated in nursing from Carol Davila University of Medicine and had been openly gay since the age of 22. Her social media accounts showed her participation in LGBT+ events and public support for human rights causes. For Andreea, her relationship with Mia represented a genuine connection that she hoped to formalize publicly. But for Mia, it was her first serious romantic involvement with another woman, surrounded by anxieties about family acceptance. Erdem Yilmaz maintained sporadic contact with his Romanian family through his mother Aishi Yilmaz, Leyla's younger sister. During his childhood, he visited Constanța occasionally in the summers, establishing a close but complex relationship with his cousin. Turkish employment records indicated an unstable work history over the past 5 years, with 8 job changes in the construction and port logistics sectors. Colleagues described him as technically competent but prone to interpersonal conflicts and disproportionate reactions to criticism. A former girlfriend, Zehra Özkan, had filed 2 reports of domestic violence against Erdem between 2021 and 2022. Both cases were dismissed for lack of sufficient evidence, according to Turkish court records. Zehra told police that Erdem displayed obsessive jealousy and controlling behavior, especially when he perceived threats to his male honor. Close relatives in Istanbul confirmed that he held strict traditional beliefs about gender roles and family structures, expressing open disapproval of relationships he considered against nature. The family dynamics had intensified during October 2023. Mia's mother, Leyla, had shared with her sister Aishi her growing concern about her daughter's rebellious phase, suspecting a relationship that Mia preferred to keep secret. Aishi relayed these concerns to Erdem, who interpreted the information as a matter of family honor to be resolved. Telecommunications records showed that Erdem had called Mia 17 times during October, all of which were either rejected or unanswered. On the evening of October 31st, Erdem showed up at Mia's apartment unannounced after locating her address through informal inquiries at the building where she worked. Startup employees later reported that a man with a foreign accent had asked about Mia at the reception desk, claiming to be a close relative who wanted to surprise her. Andreea was present during the confrontation and witnessed an intense argument between the cousins. Erdem questioned Mia about her wild lifestyle and demanded explanations about their relationship. The argument escalated when he referred to Andreea using derogatory terms. Mia ordered Erdem to leave immediately, but he refused until she promised to end this disgrace. The confrontation only ended when Andreea threatened to call the police. Erdem left, but warned that families have ways of resolving internal problems. Analysis of subsequent phone records showed that he contacted his mother in Istanbul that same night during a 47-minute call. Aishi subsequently called Leyla, sparking a chain of tense family communications that culminated in mounting psychological pressure on Mia. Over the next few days, Mia received daily calls from her mother, questioning her personal life and expressing deep disappointment with her choices. Andreea noted that Mia became increasingly anxious and avoided leaving the apartment on weekends. After returning to Istanbul, Erdem intensified his contact through text messages. Forensic analysis of Mia's cell phone revealed a pattern of communication that evolved from family concern to veiled threats. The initial messages mentioned responsibility to the family and traditions that must be respected. Starting on November 5th, the tone changed dramatically. One message read, "You are bringing shame on all of us." Another warned, "Some decisions have permanent consequences." The final message, sent hours before the murder, was explicit. "I can't let you destroy our honor. I'll be there again." Immigration records confirmed that Erdem re-entered Romania via Otopeni Airport on November 7, 2023, using a valid Turkish passport. Airport security cameras showed him disembarking alone, carrying only hand luggage. When investigators tried to locate him for questioning, they discovered that Erdem had left Bucharest in the early hours of November 9th, less than 12 hours after the murder. Flight records indicated a destination of Istanbul, but his current location remained unknown. The investigation now faced a complex jurisdictional challenge, but a disturbing discovery was about to emerge from Andrea Popescu's bank records. Chief Inspector Radu Mihai gathered his team at 8:30 a.m. on November 9th to set investigative priorities. Erdem Yilmaz's escape to Turkey had turned a domestic homicide case into a complex international operation. The first critical mistake became apparent. The lack of an immediate alert at the airports had allowed the prime suspect to leave Romanian territory unimpeded. This initial procedural failure would set a pattern of negligence that would seriously compromise the investigation. Forensic analysis of the Walther P22 pistol revealed disturbing inconsistencies that should have alerted experienced investigators. Although legally registered in the name of Andrea Popescu, technicians discovered that the weapon had been fired recently but did not bear the expected fingerprints. Both Andrea and Mia had records of handling the pistol in the previous 3 months, but the only identifiable fingerprints belonged to Erdem Yilmaz, specifically on the trigger and grip. This discovery should have raised immediate questions about timing and access, but investigators focused exclusively on confirming the guilt of the fugitive suspect. Dr. Elena Predescu, the medical examiner responsible for the autopsy, presented findings that further complicated the case. The single shot had been fired at close range, with gunpowder residue found on Mia's shirt. However, the angle of the bullet's trajectory suggested that the shooter was sitting or kneeling at the time of the shooting, not standing as initially assumed. This biomechanical discrepancy was filed away as within normal parameters, a decision that would later prove critical to the true understanding of events. The second investigative oversight emerged when it was discovered that Erdem's threatening messages had not been immediately translated from Turkish. Just 72 hours after the murder, official translators confirmed that several messages contained explicit death threats, not just family concerns as initially interpreted. A message dated November 6th, translated belatedly, read, "If you can't live with honor, you shouldn't live." Another, sent in the early hours of November 8th, warned, "Tomorrow you will understand that some traditions are more important than your modern life." Nicolae Constantinescu, Mia's father, traveled from Constanța to Bucharest on the morning of November 10th. A retired naval engineer with a methodical mindset, he quickly identified inconsistencies in the pace of the official investigation. Nicolae began his own investigation, gathering information about Erdem's movements during both visits to Bucharest. Through contacts in the maritime community, he discovered that Erdem had asked specific questions about Mia's work schedule during his first stay. A security guard at the office building where she worked confirmed that the Turkish man had tried to obtain information about her daily routine, claiming he was planning a family surprise. At the same time, investigative journalist Ioana Petrescu of the newspaper Adevărul began mapping connections between the case and broader patterns of domestic violence in immigrant communities. Her investigations revealed that Erdem had made derogatory comments about sexual orientation on social media during 2022, including a post that read, "Some diseases of modern society need to be cured by the family itself." This digital evidence, crucial to establishing premeditation, had not been collected by the official investigation due to bureaucratic limitations on international cooperation. The formal extradition request for Erdem encountered immediate bureaucratic obstacles. Turkish authorities demanded irrefutable forensic evidence before considering any legal action. The Romanian Prosecutor General's office appointed a prosecutor specializing in transnational crimes, Dr. Andrei Popovici, to coordinate international legal aspects. However, a parallel investigation conducted by Turkish authorities revealed contradictions in Erdem's alibi that Romanian investigators had overlooked. He claimed to have arrived in Istanbul on the morning of November 9 and spent the day with family members, but security cameras at Ataturk Airport showed him arriving at 2:30 p.m. Detailed analysis of GPS data from Erdem's cell phone, obtained through international judicial cooperation, showed suspicious movements within Bucharest on the morning of November 8th. The device recorded a location near Mia's apartment between 9:45 a.m. and 11:30 a.m., contradicting his statement that he had remained at the hotel during that entire period. This time discrepancy should have alerted investigators to possible manipulation of the timeline, but it was interpreted as a data synchronization error. Romanian forensic technicians recovered deleted data from Mia's laptop, discovering search history for restraining orders against family members and legal protection for LGBT+ relationships during the first week of November. The searches intensified after Erdem's initial visit, suggesting that Mia was considering preventive legal measures. More significant was the discovery of audio recordings on Mia's cell phone using a personal security app she had discreetly installed after her first confrontation with Erdem. A 7-minute recording dated October 31st captured part of the discussion between the cousins, including explicit threats that had not been previously reported. In the recording, Erdem could be heard saying, "You think you can embarrass me and there will be no consequences." Families have ways of resolving these situations. When Mia asked if he was threatening her, Erdem replied, "It's not a threat, it's a promise." This audio evidence should have been processed as evidence of premeditation, but technical analysis was delayed due to a backlog of priority cases. The initial analysis of the scene had focused excessively on the possibility of assisted suicide or domestic accident, especially given that the gun was registered in the name of the victim's partner. This hypothesis gained temporary traction when investigators discovered that Mia had searched for painless methods of suicide in October, apparently related to family pressure about her sexual orientation. Dr. Popovici even considered filing an extradition warrant, interpreting evidence as indicating that Mia may have used the gun on herself during an emotional confrontation with Erdem, who then fled in panic. This theory provided false relief to Erdem's family, who began arguing that he was merely a traumatized victim of a family tragedy. Turkish lawyers hired by the Yilmaz family pressured local authorities to consider the case an accidental death during a legitimate family intervention. However, more detailed ballistic analysis definitively ruled out suicide. The position of the gun, the blood pattern, and especially the angle of the shot were incompatible with self-inflicted injury. Dr. Predescu was categorical. The victim was executed by a third party. There is no room for alternative interpretation. On the morning of November 12th, as Romanian prosecutors prepared to intensify diplomatic pressure on Turkish authorities, forensic analyst Ana Dragici was systematically reviewing all security cameras within 500 meters of Mia's apartment. What she found in the recordings from the Continental Hotel, located 200 meters from the victim's building, would completely change the direction of the investigation and expose fundamental flaws in the initial investigative protocols. Forensic analyst Ana Dragici was applying a systematic digital evidence review methodology when she identified a critical temporal anomaly that would completely dismantle the prevailing investigative theory. The Continental Hotel's high-resolution surveillance system partially captured the entrance to the residential building where Mia lived. At 11:47 a.m. on November 12th, Dragici played back a 34-minute sequence that would reveal a meticulously fabricated criminal alibi. The images showed Erdem Yilmaz approaching Mia's building at 2:23 p.m. on November 8th, exactly 3 hours and 20 minutes after the fatal shot was fired, according to the timeline established by forensic experts. This discovery implied a complete reorganization of the investigation, fundamentally contradicting all investigative assumptions built up over 4 days of work. Frame-by-frame analysis of the images revealed that Erdem was carrying a small backpack when he entered the building, but left 18 minutes later without it, suggesting that he had deposited or removed material from the crime scene. Dr. Sergiu Ionescu, an expert in forensic temporal analysis at the Polytechnic University of Bucharest, was called in to establish a precise timeline using metadata from multiple digital sources. His temporal reconstruction fundamentally contradicted the initial investigative assumptions. The revised timeline established that Mia's last vital sign occurred at 11:03 a.m. via a WhatsApp message to a co-worker. Acoustic analysis of environmental recordings placed the fatal shot between 11:20 a.m. and 11:25 a.m. Erdem arrived at the building at 2:23 p.m. and remained there until 2:41 p.m., while Andrea discovered the body at 5:43 p.m. This timeline suggested that Mia had been murdered approximately 6 hours and 23 minutes before Andrea reported the crime, and that Erdem had visited the scene after the death, possibly to tamper with evidence or establish his presence at the scene. The discovery forced investigators to consider that the prime suspect could not have been the direct perpetrator of the murder, shifting the entire investigative paradigm from direct execution to conspiracy by proxy or third-party manipulation. Nicolae Constantinescu had conducted an independent analysis using naval engineering methodology applied to criminal investigation, reaching similar conclusions through a purely systematic approach. His 47-page dossier delivered to Prosecutor Popovici on November 13th meticulously documented inconsistencies in official statements and identified time gaps that the police had overlooked. Analysis of communication patterns showed that Mia never left messages unanswered for more than 2 hours during business hours, indicating that the digital silence beginning at 11:03 a.m. represented a critical incident. Mapping Erdem's movements by cross-referencing GPS data, hotel records, and surveillance cameras categorically proved that he was physically in Istanbul at the estimated time of the shooting. The family conspiracy theory developed by Nikolai was based on circumstantial evidence suggesting the involvement of third parties with access to the apartment and detailed knowledge of Mia's routines. This methodological approach contrasted sharply with the official investigation, which had focused exclusively on confirming the guilt of the most obvious suspect. The journalistic investigation conducted by Ioana Petrescu identified behavioral patterns consistent with systematic manipulation of the crime scene. She discovered that Erdem had technical expertise in construction, including knowledge of home security systems and non-destructive entry methods. More significantly, Petrescu located Zera Özkan, Erdem's ex-girlfriend, who revealed details about his characteristic intimidation tactics. Zera explained that Erdem never made direct threats, but instead created situations where the victim felt vulnerable, then appeared as a protector or problem solver for the problem he himself had created. This revelation suggested that Erdem could have orchestrated the murder without carrying it out directly, using third parties or manipulating circumstances to put Mia in a position of risk. The journalistic investigative methodology had identified a pattern of behavior that formal police analysis had failed to detect due to procedural limitations and an excessive focus on direct physical evidence. Forensic analysis of Mia's cell phone revealed crucial data that had been overlooked in the initial investigation. Dr. Christian Ballen, a digital crime expert, discovered that the device had been tampered with after the victim's death. System logs showed that someone had accessed the phone at 2:31 p.m. on November 8th, deleting 7 text messages and 3 voice calls. The digital tampering coincided exactly with the period when Erdem was present in the apartment, confirming his involvement in altering evidence, but not necessarily in committing the crime. The deleted messages, recovered through automatic cloud backup, contained information that would completely redefine the investigation. One of them, sent by Mia at 10:47 a.m., read, "Andrea, don't come home today. He got a copy of the key. I'm scared." This communication indicated that Mia was aware of an imminent threat, but did not clearly specify the identity of the perpetrator, suggesting the possibility of multiple suspects or confusion about the real source of the danger. The discovery that Erdem was not physically present during the murder forced investigators to consider more complex alternative scenarios. 3 possibilities emerged through systematic analysis. Murder by proxy, where Erdem hired a third party to kill Mia. Extreme psychological manipulation that induced Mia to commit suicide through coercion, or a family conspiracy involving other members of the family network directly in the execution. Analysis of Erdem's financial records revealed a suspicious transaction of $3,500 made on November 6th to an unidentified Romanian bank account using an international money transfer service that offered anonymity to the recipient. Nicolae Constantinescu, Ioana Petrescu, and Dr. Popovici developed a coordinated strategy to expose the manipulation of evidence and force a complete reopening of the investigation. The protocol included a coordinated press conference for the simultaneous presentation of evidence by all parties, intensified diplomatic pressure using the new timeline to demand immediate extradition, and investigation of co-conspirators through the identification of possible accomplices on Romanian territory. The operation was scheduled for November 15th, using a public exposure methodology to force investigative transparency. On the morning of November 14th, an anonymous call to the Bucharest police would again change the entire dynamic of the case. The female voice, speaking Romanian with a slight accent, stated, "You are looking for the wrong person. If you want to know who really killed Mia, look for the woman who had the most to lose from this relationship." The call was traced to a public phone in central Bucharest, but technical analysis of the recording revealed acoustic characteristics suggesting intimate knowledge of the details of the crime. The next morning, as investigators developed protocols to trace the origin of the call, Andreea Popescu did not show up for work at the University Emergency Hospital. Her supervisor tried to contact her throughout the day, but her cell phone remained off. When colleagues went to check her apartment following hospital emergency procedures, they discovered that she had disappeared, taking only essential clothing and a significant amount of cash. The discovery would completely transform the person considered the main witness into the new priority suspect in the investigation. The Bucharest Criminal Investigation Brigade began a systematic search for Andreea Popescu at 6 a.m. on November 15th, applying location protocols for fugitive suspects. Analysis of bank records revealed that she had withdrawn $12,000 from her savings account in 2 transactions on November 13th and 14th. ATM cameras documented visibly anxious behavior, with constant checking of the surroundings, a behavioral pattern consistent with guilt and preparation for escape. Dr. Andrei Popovici coordinated an interagency operation involving the border police, considering the high risk of international escape. Cell phone tracking located Andrea's last ping near Gara de Nord station at 11:47 p.m. on the 14th, indicating an attempt to leave Bucharest by rail. At 8:30 a.m., agents located Andrea in a budget hotel near the Bulgarian border. She offered no resistance during her arrest, but remained silent during her transport back to the capital, behavior that experts interpreted as a premeditated defensive strategy. A search of her luggage revealed $9,800 in cash, a valid passport for international travel, and a laptop containing files that would completely reshape the understanding of the crime. The digital device contained meticulous documentation of a plan executed over 3 weeks, demonstrating a level of premeditation rarely seen in crimes of passion. Dr. Christian Balan, an expert in digital crimes, discovered that Andrea had extensively researched undetectable homicides and crime scene manipulation between October 18th and November 7th. The most incriminating file, named finalsolution.docs, detailed a complex strategy to eliminate Mia using Erdem as a scapegoat. The document included behavioral mapping with detailed analysis of Erdem's threat patterns, an execution timeline synchronizing the murder with evidence tampering, and an escape strategy planning to leave Romania after an appropriate mourning period. Andrea had documented that her relationship with Mia had deteriorated significantly since October, when Mia expressed a desire to de-intensify the relationship and was considering moving to Germany for postgraduate studies. Technical analysis of the plan revealed disturbing operational sophistication. Andrea used medical knowledge to calculate exactly where to shoot, ensuring quick death with minimal suffering, demonstrating a psychological paradox between genuine affection for the victim and homicidal determination. She had practiced with the pistol for 3 consecutive weekends at a shooting range outside Bucharest, establishing the ballistic competence necessary for precise execution. Records of her attendance at the shooting range confirmed systematic progress in her shooting accuracy, evidencing methodical preparation. The timeline reconstructed through digital evidence established that Andrea falsely called the hospital at 9:15 a.m. on November 8, claiming a family emergency to ensure her absence was justified. She returned to the apartment at 10:30 a.m. Elle confronted Mia about plans to move out, received confirmation of her fears of abandonment, and fired a single shot after an intensified argument at 11:20 a.m. Between 11:25 a.m. and 2:20 p.m., she systematically manipulated the scene by carefully positioning the body, selectively cleaning evidence, and preparing a detailed alibi. At 2:23 p.m., Erdem arrived as planned by Andrea, who had secretly contacted him claiming an emergency with Mia. Between 2:25 p.m. and 2:40 p.m., Andrea allowed Erdem to find the body, deliberately contaminating the scene with his fingerprints while directing suspicion through a narrative about family threats. Erdem fled in panic at 2:41 p.m., exactly as Andrea had calculated based on prior behavioral analysis. The transfer of $3,500 was not payment for murder, but an amount that Andrea deposited into her own secondary account to simulate evidence of an outside conspiracy, creating a false financial trail to reinforce suspicions about Erdem. Forensic analysis of the apartment, conducted with a new methodological perspective, revealed subtle signs of manipulation that had been overlooked in the initial investigation. Microscopic fibers from surgical gloves were found on the pistol's grip, consistent with medical equipment that Andrea used professionally. Experts discovered that the security recording allegedly made by Mia had been digitally edited. Acoustic analysis software showed that parts of the conversation with Erdem had been cut out, removing context that could suggest prior manipulation by Andrea. Confronted with incontrovertible digital evidence, Andrea broke her silence after 18 hours of questioning conducted using specialized psychological methodology. She admitted to killing Mia, but insisted it was a crime of passion resulting from unacceptable emotional abandonment, attempting to establish a defense of diminished capacity. In a 3-hour and 47-minute statement, Andrea revealed that she had discovered Mia's plans to end the relationship and move to Berlin in January 2024. The prospect of abandonment represented, in her distorted perception, unacceptable betrayal that justified a lethal response. Andrea confessed to deliberately manipulating the situation with Erdem, informing him about the relationship specifically to provoke conservative reactions from him, creating the perfect alibi for a crime already planned. This revelation demonstrated a level of psychological manipulation that transcended a typical crime of passion, indicating a personality with systematically applied psychopathic characteristics. Andrea Popescu's trial began in March 2024 at the Bucharest court, setting a legal precedent for crimes involving systematic manipulation of evidence and the use of third parties as scapegoats. The prosecution presented a case based on irrefutable forensic evidence through digital documentation of the plan, a scientifically reconstructed timeline, and technical analysis of the manipulation of the crime scene. The defense attempted to argue diminished mental capacity due to undiagnosed borderline personality disorder, but psychiatric evaluations conducted by 3 independent experts confirmed full awareness and premeditation. Dr. Mihai Cristia, a forensic psychiatrist, concluded that Andreea exhibited a narcissistic personality with manipulative tendencies, but without impairment of moral judgment. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty of premeditated murder. Judge Elena Marinescu imposed a sentence of 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole, stating that the systematic manipulation of evidence and the use of third parties as scapegoats demonstrate exceptional dangerousness that requires prolonged social isolation. The case sparked significant debate about investigation protocols in domestic crimes involving LGBT+ relationships, forcing a review of procedures that had favored external suspects over perpetrators close to the victim. Human rights associations criticized the initial tendency to suspect the discoverer without adequately considering objective forensic evidence, but acknowledged that subsequent investigative corrections demonstrated the effectiveness of protocols when rigorously applied. Nicolae Constantinescu established a foundation for training investigators in the analysis of crimes with discriminatory motives, stating that "my daughter died twice, first by the bullet, then by the investigative negligence that almost allowed the real killer to escape." Ioana Petrescu's journalistic investigation received the National Investigative Journalism Award for exposing systemic flaws, and her book Anatomy of a Conspiracy has become an academic reference for criminological studies. Erdem Yilmaz voluntarily returned to Romania in December 2023 to testify as a witness at the trial, revealing that Andreea had secretly contacted him on November 7, claiming that Mia was in emotional crisis and needed urgent family support. He stated that he had been completely manipulated by someone who made it seem like I was the protective cousin coming to help, when in fact I was being turned into the perfect suspect. The case set a legal precedent in Romania for crimes involving conspiracy by proxy, defining the deliberate use of innocent third parties to establish a false alibi as a specific aggravating factor in premeditated homicides. Andreea Popescu is serving her sentence at Târgu Women's Penitentiary under a closed regime, representing the first case in Romania tried under the new legal framework for crimes of systematic manipulation. Quarterly psychiatric reports conducted during November 2024 document that she maintains partial rationalization of the crime, consistently referring to the murder as a proportional response to emotional abandonment. In October 2024, her request for a reduced sentence was unanimously denied by the High Court, based on behavioral analysis that identified a lack of genuine remorse and persistent manipulative patterns within the prison environment. Behavioral analysis conducted by criminal psychologist Dr. Carmen Estrate documented that Andreea developed interpersonal hierarchies with other inmates based on intellectual superiority, attempting to establish control through medical knowledge and psychological analysis of individual vulnerabilities. This pattern confirms a diagnosis of pathological narcissism with a lack of genuine empathy for the victim, characteristics that experts consider indicative of a high risk of recidivism if she were to be released early. Specialized monitoring protocols have been implemented to document behavioral developments over the next 5 years. Erdem Yilmaz returned to Istanbul in January 2024, but his experience of being involuntarily instrumentalized resulted in post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosed by a team specializing in criminal manipulation trauma. He attends weekly therapy at a specialized clinic at Istanbul University and has completely changed his career path, now working as an industrial safety instructor with a specific focus on verification protocols for family emergency situations. Erdem has become an active advocate for validation systems for reports involving complex family dynamics, contributing to the development of prevention protocols in immigrant communities. Nicolae Constantinescu has directed his systematic analytical skills toward establishing the Mia Constantinescu Foundation for Scientific Investigation of Domestic Crimes, an organization that has trained 127 investigators in 14 European countries between December 2023 and October 2024. The foundation focuses specifically on identifying evidence tampering by perpetrators with specialized technical knowledge, developing protocols that combine traditional forensic analysis with engineering methodology applied to criminology. Statistical data collected during the first year of operation documented an 89% effectiveness in the early identification of patterns of tampering in similar cases. The Constantinescu Protocol, officially adopted by the Romanian Ministry of the Interior in March 2024, establishes mandatory procedures for investigating domestic homicides based on scientific analysis of the flaws identified in this case. The protocol includes independent chronological analysis through automatic verification of multiple digital sources, expanded behavioral profiling investigating all persons close to the victim regardless of apparent cooperation, and mandatory verification of technical skills that could facilitate crime scene manipulation. Implementation resulted in a 67% increase in the correct resolution rate of complex cases during the first half of 2024. The Bucharest Police Academy implemented a specific module on crimes by proxy manipulation, methodologically studying cases where perpetrators use innocent third parties to establish alibis. The course has become a benchmark for law enforcement agencies across the European Union, with training requests received from 23 countries. An effectiveness analysis conducted by the Polytechnic University documented that investigators trained in the protocol identify patterns of systematic manipulation 78% faster compared to conventional methodology. In June 2024, the Romanian Parliament passed the Law on Protection Against Criminal Manipulation, Law number 127/2024, specifically criminalizing deliberate manipulation of forensic evidence, use of third parties as scapegoats, and exploitation of professional knowledge for criminal purposes. The legislation establishes increased penalties for health, engineering, or security professionals who use technical knowledge to plan crimes. Andreea represents the first case tried under this legal framework, establishing a legal precedent that will influence similar investigations in the coming decade. The Romanian LGBT+ community has developed complex reflections on internal security and partner screening protocols in the wake of the case. Human rights associations have implemented dual programs, support for relationships in hostile family contexts, but also protocols for identifying manipulative behavior within the community itself. Dr. Raluca Molotova, a sociologist at the University of Bucharest, conducted a longitudinal study on domestic violence in same-sex relationships, documenting that 23% of the cases analyzed involved manipulation of community support structures by internal perpetrators, a pattern previously unrecognized by protection organizations. Data collected by the Constantinescu Foundation between December 2023 and October 2024 identified statistically significant predictive patterns for similar manipulation crimes. Analysis of 847 cases documented that 87% of perpetrators had specialized technical knowledge, 92% of victims had expressed a desire to change their lives in the preceding 8 weeks, and 78% of cases involved innocent third parties being systematically targeted for suspicion. This data was integrated into the early warning system developed by the Bucharest Metropolitan Police, which monitors communication and behavior patterns through artificial intelligence to identify manipulation-based crime planning. A full forensic investigation never definitively established whether Andreea had considered alternative methods of disposal before choosing direct murder. Analysis of search history revealed research into undetectable domestic accidents and synthetic overdoses, suggesting that homicide by firearm may not have been the first option considered. This discovery has led experts to question how many other perpetrators may be applying similar research methodology to undetected crimes, representing a systemic vulnerability that has not yet been fully mapped. The Yilmaz family in Istanbul remains divided on the final interpretation of the case. Some members maintain that conservative family traditions created an environment conducive to Erdem's manipulation, while others argue that Andreea simply exploited pre-existing dynamics for her own criminal purposes. This division reflects broader questions about collective responsibility in crimes that exploit traditional cultural structures, sparking academic debates about prevention in communities with conflicts between modern and conservative values. 24 months after Mia Constantinescu's murder, statistical analysis conducted by the Ministry of the Interior documents that 847 similar cases of domestic violence were reported in Romania during 2024, with 34% involving some form of third-party manipulation to establish an alibi. This proportion represents a 127% increase compared to 2022 data, suggesting that greater awareness of the methodology may be revealing previously undetected criminal patterns, or that perpetrators are adopting more sophisticated manipulation techniques. The central question that remains is not whether Andreea Popescu represents an isolated psychopathic aberration, but how many other perpetrators with specialized technical knowledge are currently developing similar methodologies of systematic manipulation. Analysis of European crime trends documents a 45% increase in domestic crimes involving digital manipulation of evidence during 2023-2024, indicating that this case may represent the starting point of an emerging pattern that justice systems are not yet fully prepared to detect. If cases like this raise questions about how many prematurely closed investigations may have overlooked perpetrators with systematic manipulation capabilities, sign up to follow future analysis. Criminal complexity is constantly evolving, and only rigorous scientific methodology can reveal truths that conventional protocols cannot detect.